Hi, this is James Sayer on The Breakdown. This is episode number 27. Tonight we're talking about America, a criticism. That's right. Tonight we're going to talk about our beloved country, the United States of America, which I am a citizen, which most of our viewers are from, but not all. So we're going to talk about America. It's going to be a challenging discussion tonight. A lot of good stuff loaded up for you, ready in the hopper that we're going to talk about. I got a nice set of notes tonight, nice and organized too, to keep us on track. That'll be a nice change. And what we're going to do first, I want to soften you up because this is a criticism. So I am, as I said ahead of time, we are targeting the downsides of the United States. We are going to take a look at that because we are awash all the time in pro-American propaganda. This is just part of growing up in any country. Every country generates its own nationalist propaganda. Every people in every country think they're the greatest country in the world. The United States is no exception. Many Americans convinced we are the greatest country in the world, and I would agree we are one of the greatest countries in the world for many reasons. We're one of the greatest countries in the world. But we're going to talk about the strengths and weaknesses. But like I said, we're going to really focus on the weaknesses, but I'm going to soften you up first. We're going to talk about the good stuff. Let's talk about all the good things. We'll say all, because these lists are not comprehensive, but let's talk about some of the big things that are really good about the United States. It is a business-friendly country. We know that. So from a business perspective, right, if you're a business person, typically this country has been, more friendly to entrepreneurs and businesses than a lot of other advanced countries. Fewer regulations, and things like that. Lower barriers to entry and things like that. So that's one of the benefits. Lots of tax loopholes and lots of different types of incentives available to businesses, and just a very pro-business, pro-capitalist orientation in this country that's been around since the beginning of the founding. It has typically been more of a center-right country in general. There is a historic fear of government interference, government oppression that goes back to the founding and to the rebellion against England and the overthrowing of them, right, and the founding of our country was all about throwing off the yoke of oppression by what we perceived as this oppressive, government. And so anyway, that's, business friendly. All right, that's good for business. Vast resources. Obviously, we have a huge country, 50 states. It's the third largest country in the world behind Russia's number one, Canada's number two. But geographically, we are the third largest country on the planet. So we have vast resources, from west to east coast. As a ginormous country, we virtually have energy independence at this point because of the amount of oil we have and natural gas, just buried underneath us. And, we're a very innovative country, right? I mean, we are the descendants of people who struck out and had the guts and the will and the determination to carve out a new life in a strange part of the world. So we carry some of that in our DNA, that pioneer spirit. And there is that sort of ethic that is very present in the United States of this, sort of idea of self-sufficiency and being industrious and, pulling yourself up by your bootstraps. That doesn't actually play out in reality. We all need assistance at various times in life when things happen. But that is kind of the ethos, and there's a lot of strength in that, right? That we're go-getters, we go after it, we start businesses, we fail, we get up, we try again, we don't give up, and we're creative, right? We're always starting new businesses, trying to come up with new technologies. One of the biggest technology driver in the world, right? We have most of the major, cutting-edge IT corporations in the country, not all of them, but we've been a major driver of innovation, most especially for the last 50 years, but even before then. So, we're an economic powerhouse. I mean, we're the biggest economy in the world. China's number two. They're starting to come up fast. But yeah, we're the largest economy in the world by far. Japan's number 3, by the way. Germany's 4, and the UK is the 5th largest economy in the world. But we're the biggest. We're the biggest one, and we're what's what I'm saying? We're an imperfect but highly adaptable country. We've got a lot of flaws, but we are able to adapt, and we are an economic powerhouse. And for example, we'll say even after COVID, right, and all the economic problems that have come from that, the first quarter of 2021, our economy grew by 6%. And in the second quarter of 2021, the economy grew by 8.5%. So even still, with all the problems that we're having in our country, which there are many, and we're painfully aware of a lot of them, and particularly COVID and the shutdown and the downturn that happened because of that, we're still doing well, and we're having actually what is for the most part really a strong economic recovery. We also have a very strong university system in general, which attracts students from all over the world. They actually come here to want to study at our universities because of the protection of free thought in our society. Freedom of speech is enshrined, in the First Amendment, and that reflects itself in the university system and the way we have it set up. So, we have people from all over the world, from other advanced countries, that will send their rich kids here to study in our colleges. So that is good. And we know that it's not just elite schools, that also state institutions educate their students on par with elite schools in general. That in general, you don't really learn that much more at an elite school. It's more of a networking opportunity than anything. You make more if you go to an elite school. That is clear from the data. If you go to an elite school, you will make more money than someone who doesn't, in general. But you don't necessarily know anymore. It's just who you know. So, something to keep in mind about that. Anyway, the U.S., think about this too. We have big homes, right? That's the nice thing. Our homes tend to be bigger than a lot of other countries, especially in advanced countries, but countries in general. We have bigger homes, more space. We have a bigger country, more space. And I like that. I like space, right? I do feel a little claustrophobic when I go to a city environment, when I'm in a densely packed city. I can deal with it, but my typical preference is, to be in a wider open space. And I think a lot of Americans feel that way because we're used to that. And I've heard from some Europeans who've come here that when they come there, they're just amazed by how much space there is and how, compared to them, there's no one here, right? That even though we have over 335 million people in this country, it's so less densely packed than, say, like a country like Germany or England or France, much more spread out. And they noticed that right away when they came over here. But most Americans don't travel to Europe, so we don't have that comparison. We're geographically isolated. Let's not ding Americans for not traveling. It's a whole ocean away, and a lot of people aren't paid very well in this country, unfortunately, so they're never going to be able to afford to travel to Europe and see that. But we are safe. We're safe geographically, right? We've been isolated. It's very hard to attack us. We've been attacked by the Japanese at Pearl Harbor. We were attacked by the British twice. We fought them twice. And obviously we were attacked during 9/11 with the planes. But it's very difficult to attack us. Because of that. So we have a sense of security that's built in from the beginning. You grow up feeling safe. And we have the biggest military in the world. We spent, last year, the United States spent $778 billion on defense, which we're the number one spender. We have the largest military by far in the world. Larger than the 11 next largest militaries combined, which includes Russia, Saudi Arabia, all the other larger armies of the world, like France and the UK. Add all those, like Italy. There's 11 of them. You add them all up, they're still, all of them combined are spending less than we are on defense. So we got the weapons, We got a lot of really good weapons. We got a lot of people who are really skilled with them, and we spend a lot of money on it, right? So we feel safe, right? Because we're not only do we spend a lot on it, not only is it big, but it is one of the best, arguably the best military fighting force on the planet. So we have good reasons to feel safe, and that's a good feeling. You grow up feeling safe. Nobody's going to invade the United States, and that's actually a feeling I felt before myself. Was like, I've thought about, maybe I would move to another country just for the hell of it or something at some point in my life, and then I thought, but there's a security in living in the United States. You feel safe. Like anywhere else you go, something could happen. And you're like, well, what the hell are they going to do? What is the government going to do? And it's like, well, I live in the United States. It might not be the smartest damn thing, but I imagine they're going to end up blowing the hell out of some people eventually. Obviously, a lot of times that turns out to be really bad. We blow up the wrong people, or we do it the wrong way, and make it worse than it was before. So a lot of times we don't. We need a military, but we don't always use our power wisely. We make mistakes that end up making our problems worse than they were in the first place. But anyway, we feel we're safe because of that. It's a low tax country, right? You may not feel that way. It doesn't make you feel when you pay taxes. None of us like it. Obviously, we have a low tax orientation going back to the Boston Tea Party. So there's a natural preference for us to want to have low taxes, as there's anyone, but it's actually built into our historical DNA as a country. But if you look at the data, overall, if you compare the United States to the average advanced economy, like OECD country, right? They spend, the average country in the OECD spends about 34% of GDP. Their tax revenue, right? They garner about 34% of GDP is gathered from taxation. Okay, so 34% compared to the United States, our tax revenue only comes about to 24% of GDP, so 10% less. We have that much lower funding for the government because we're a low tax country. So we're going to talk a little bit more about that as well. But we do help many countries with foreign aid. The United States spends $35.5 billion in 2020. $35.5 billion. So you say, well, that's really generous. That's a lot of money. That is a lot of money to help people around the world in different ways, with fighting diseases or poverty or different things. Helping them with education, economic opportunity. Like I said, we're a driver of innovation. We're also our Constitution is also the world's longest surviving charter of government. It's been around for 232 years, the United States Constitution. So that's very impressive that it's been around that long. It's still functioning. No other constitution has been around that long. And of course, the Constitution, what's even more amazing is the content of it. It's quite incredible, the rights that it establishes, that it enshrines for the protections of citizens within the country, and in particular minorities, to protect them from being overrun by the powerful or by the majority. So that is the U.S. Constitution is a truly significant historical achievement that echoes through time and will continue to for centuries. These are like the really big things. And I'll also just say, there's a lot of great convenience and variety in the United States. If you go to a lot of foreign countries, they just don't have the variety in stores. It's just not the selection available to you that you can go to. And that is kind of a petty thing, but it is also true that there's just a lot of other choices of basically we have just more choices, period, here in this country, period. More variety, more convenience, it's often to our detriment, right? Maybe we satisfy the desire for convenience a little too much with the fast food and just our speed, in a rush orientation all the time. But it is a convenient, there's a lot of convenience built in to our society, where, you're able to do things, quickly, like, get in and out of a restaurant pretty quickly, if you're going through the drive-through or whatever. A lot of countries don't have that, or they don't have it as much, right? And you could, it takes longer to eat, and then even their cultures, like if you go to France, it's going to be a 2-hour lunch, right? And most Americans' heads would just explode with something like that, right? And that's a healthier way to be: eat a longer lunch, slower, and have a happier life, But we're always in a hurry, so it's like we need that convenience to juice us up and keep us going. Give me that Starbucks coffee and let me hit it. Let's go, right? That's kind of the orientation of our country. We got to hustle, hustle, hustle to go make that money to live the dream. But anyway, these are some of the really. I also say that we are often a leader and a force for global human rights and democracy, as we've seen throughout the world on numerous occasions, and we know this. And this is part of our ethos, and it's part of the propaganda that we hear all the time about how we're standing up for democracy across the world and helping our allies. And a lot of that's true, but it's not always true. Sometimes we're just, we're looking out for our business interests, which is nothing wrong with that. But there's a certain point when it's like, yeah, it's good to look out for your business interests, but you shouldn't kill people to do it. There's a line you draw where it's like, yeah, you're right. Even if it is good for business, it is wrong to kill people, to further my business interests. That would be immoral and wrong, and I shouldn't do it. Even if it is advantageous, right, to do so, it is morally wrong. And then there is take the morality out of it. There's the blowback. The more people you kill and oppress, the more people hate you, and will eventually rise up against you, right? So you really want to use soft power, smart power, not resort to military force unless it's an absolute last resort, and only if absolutely necessary for the protections of yourself or your allies, right? If your interests are attacked, you do have to protect them, and it is good that like the U.S. Navy's out there protecting the sea lanes and things like that. That they're part of a group of nations that are doing that. Protecting shipping from pirates and from rogue nations, or nations that are just not big on the rule of law to begin with. But that's the overview of the good stuff. It's a great country, one of the most powerful countries in the world, in so many ways the leader of the world. So, because of that, because of our power, we can do a lot of great things, right? We can do our economy is like $23 trillion, over that now. I think it's like 2019. So, we have a huge economy, and what we are able to do, if we set our mind to it and if we do it the right way, is almost unimaginable, right? So we have tremendous power to do good, but because we're such big boys, if we throw our weight around the wrong way, we can also hurt a lot of people, even without meaning to. So we're going to talk now about what are the downsides. What is this criticism of the United States of which you spoke, sir? So now we will discuss, and I'll try and move it along so that your eyes don't glaze over, but I do have a substantial list that we do need to talk about. So anyway, first of all, let's talk about U.S. foreign relations. Okay, there's gunboat diplomacy that went on as part of the United States foreign diplomacy for years, starting in the early 1800s and going on for decades. And that's how we basically controlled most of the countries within the Western Hemisphere to our advantage for trade purposes and also for safety as well. And there's many countries that remember this gunboat diplomacy all too well. So some of those countries would include the Philippines, Cuba, Haiti, most countries in South and Central America, other countries as well. And I should point out, that's how we got Hawaii, was we basically sent the U.S. Navy up there and sent a warship up and basically just said, it's time to sign. You're joining the United States of America, and it's time to sign this piece of paper. Welcome. That's basically about as much choice as Hawaii had in joining the Union. Puerto Rico was also, that was one of the spoils from the Spanish-American War, which was a trumped-up war, basically just to gain territory and control more territory within the Western Hemisphere. And it was successful in that because we gained Cuba, we gained Puerto Rico, we gained control of the Philippines, we also gained control of Guam, right? So those conquests, I mean, obviously they yielded massive returns, right? Us taking Hawaii, us taking Puerto Rico, us taking Guam, us taking all these places, we held the Philippines for a time, and they actually put up a revolt, and we killed like hundreds of thousands of them during the revolt. They didn't want the U.S. We were ostensibly holding it till they were ready to rule themselves, right? While we had U.S. businesses over there, making a lot of money, and so we were looking out for their interests. But the Filipinos wanted to rule themselves. We wouldn't let them do that. So there was an uprising. This is in the late 1800s, so we killed hundreds of thousands of them. And there's still a lot of resentment in Philippine society today about the U.S. actions that took place at that time when we for a time took over the Philippines from Spain after the Spanish-American War. So we've got a checkered history. Like we do look out for democracy, but we also like to, make sure we get a favorable deal. And there have been plenty of times when we've thrown our muscle around and killed a lot of people, not to protect democracy, but to protect business interests. And there's a great book by former Marine General, long since passed. This is going way back, over 100 years, by General Smedley Butler. He wrote a book called War is a Racket, and he talks all about how the United States military was very much involved, particularly the Marine Corps, in which he was in going around the world and basically functioning as muscle for large international corporations working in different third world countries, within the Western Hemisphere, but also elsewhere. So that's if you ever want to check out that book, it's a good one. So anyway, so we give a lot of foreign aid, like I mentioned, right? We do give a lot of foreign aid, $35.5 billion in 2020. So that's a lot of money, okay? And that's the largest amount of all the nations. No nation gets more than $35.5 billion. However, we come in 24th if you judge not by amount, but by percentage. There's 23 other advanced nations that provide more foreign aid by percentage than the United States. How much is foreign aid do we give to other countries? Like I said, $35.5 billion. How much is that? That is 0.17%. 0.17% of gross national income. Right? So we're 24th, number 24 of donors. There's 23 other advanced country donors that donate more per percentage than we do. So the next time people say that we're a super generous country, keep this important fact in mind. Now, here's a downside we need to talk about. A lot of people don't talk about this. Two things. One, very unfortunate history that we have supporting dictators, particularly during the Cold War, supporting a lot of different dictators in South and Central America, but also throughout the world and in Europe, out of fear of communism, or supporting regimes that were what we call pro-business, anti-labor. Oftentimes we had companies in countries that were going to, it was going to be more difficult if the Labor Party won or the Socialist Party won. And so we would support the fascist dictator of that country instead, because he was just going to let us do what we want without any interference, without improving, workers' rights or anything like that. So that went on, and some of it was a legitimate fear communism during the Cold War simply because of the hostility between the U.S. and Russia. But the fear of communism has always been overblown. Understanding of communism globally, but especially in the United States, is poor. Very soon, some point, we're going to talk about, if not in this season, the next season, the tyranny of global, or we'll say political ideologies, and the lies of a lot of these sort of slogans and labels that we have been fed to believe about what a political ideology actually is. I said before that there's many aspects of communism, what they call communism, that are extremely similar to fascism. Just different forms of authoritarianism. As we interpret it, as we understand it, but the truth is, according to Marx, communism is a democracy. It's a tyranny of the democracy. It can be. There's not necessarily any civil rights or Bill of Rights or protections for minorities built in. So a communist, and everything's equal, right? There's no hierarchy. Everybody's equal. Everybody gets roughly the same stuff, right? There's no money. That's never existed. So anything they call communist in the world, it's not, because it's never existed. It's an idea that cannot exist. So just remember that. And we will talk about that in a future episode, about how we're often misled by the terminologies that were used. And that academia gets it wrong as much as everybody else. Not necessarily because they don't know better, but because it's easier for them to communicate in the less accurate common terminology than it is to try and convince everyone to see it correctly. So we will talk about that in an upcoming episode. But yeah, so that's led, but us supporting dictators, especially during the Cold War, has led to a lot of atrocities being carried out, often in our name. I mean, this even happened during the War on Terror, when we were, for a time, torturing people, waterboarding them, which is a form of torture, but there were other forms of torture as well. And then when we stopped doing it, we started doing the extraordinary renditions, where we would basically kidnap somebody, potentially a terrorist, hopefully they were terrorists, and taking them to a black site in a foreign country of one of our allies, whose standards for human rights aren't quite as high, and they would do the torturing. So we're clean, we're free of it, right? We sent them there, and we probably have one of our guys in the room while it's happening, maybe even telling their guys what to do. But technically, we're not doing the torturing. So that's how it works. So yeah, we've done that. Anyway, let's talk about foreign aid for a second here. Often our foreign aid has consequences, negative consequences we don't realize. For example, this happened in Haiti. Donations to NGOs, non-government organizations, like different charities and things that are legitimately trying to help people, right? And do important work. But sometimes what happens if if you make donations to NGOs, can actually, if you donate too much to them, it diverts funding away from the state, right? So, and that's individual donations and also donations from the United States government going to NGOs instead of the Haitian government, right? So what happens is you got a bunch of NGOs running around Haiti. They're not all registered. They're never all registered. So you always got some, and they're not coordinating. So they're not working as efficiently as possible. They're all trying to help people and do good things, and they are, but they're not doing them as effectively as they could be doing them. And they're drawing that revenue that comes from individuals and the U.S. federal government away from the state. Ideally, what you want to have is you want that money from individuals, and you want that money from the U.S. government going to the state. And then the state determines how to allocate the resources most effectively for the country and be able to run. It needs the funding to be able to run competently to provide these resources. You can't do that if you don't have sufficient funding. Obviously, Haiti's had a lot of corruption. Their first democratic elections were only in 1990, so they have a lot of problems, and they always have, and we've contributed to that as well, historically. So you say, well, why give them a bunch of money if their government's corrupt? Well, there's kind of a two-step process here. One is you make sure that the country has, the right systems in place and democratic accountability and that sufficient transparency so that there's always going to be some corruption, but there's always holes and gaps and things. But that you have a system where overall the corruption will be limited, right? And that it will provide you more efficient outcomes to do it through the state because of that, if you have the right processes and procedures in place and sufficient transparency and accountability. Then when you have that system, not perfect, but decent enough, then you can provide that funding to them, and it can help the people. Problem is they've really struggled to have a government that was not corrupt. But a lot of that is because, we have interfered with their development from the very beginning. The United States refused to recognize Haiti as a country for the first 60 years of its existence. And that's largely because of pressure from slave owners in the United States who did not, want them, didn't want them to be acknowledged as a country. So it was like they declared their independence in like 1860 or 1800. It wasn't until we didn't recognize them until around 1860 as a country. And then we repeatedly had, we had a huge advantage, obviously. The United States had a huge advantage over Haiti. So we were always negotiating very unfavorable trade practices that always kind of put the screws to Haiti. So they were never able to get ahead, right? Because we always made sure the deals, were extra sweet for us and, just enough for them. And so that's been going on for a couple hundred years. And we've occupied that country twice. We occupied them, I think it was between 1915 and 1934, mostly just to protect our own interests, our own business interests there. But then, like I said, also our aid goes there, and so it can weaken the state. We unintentionally weaken the state by donating money to NGOs instead, and also our food aid. We donate food, let's say again for Haiti. What happens is because we're able to flood the market because we have a lot of food available at pretty low prices because farmers in the United States are so heavily subsidized by the U.S. government. Also a potential episode coming up. So because of that, what happens is the Haitian market, for example, gets flooded with food, American food, which then drives down all the market prices on the food in Haiti, which then puts out a bunch of Haitian farmers who then have to sell their farms and go move to the slums in Port-au-Prince. So these are some unintended consequences where we think we're doing good, right? We're trying to do good. We want to do good, but we actually we're causing more harm than good sometimes because we haven't fully thought things through. And, it's like we're trying to put a Band-Aid on something here. We're trying to fix something after 200 years of like kicking the crap out of them and treating them like garbage. And now we think like sending them a little foreign aid's gonna make it all better. When in fact, it often actually makes it worse. So the main thing we would need to do to help a country like Haiti or any country is, one, make sure they've got a good democratic government that's accountable and transparent and responsible and effective, reasonably so. And then you provide money to the state, right? And that's how you do it. And that's how you help them grow and develop. And the state can involve the private sector, right? But that they will work in partnership. And we see that a lot in the United States where the state and private sector work hand in hand all the time. So anyway, that's one issue. The U.S. foreign relations, we've got a lot of stuff to work on. We can talk about Afghanistan, the Middle East, and the war on terror. $8 trillion we spent, right, for that disaster, and we're probably more hated now than ever. But anyway, we also want to talk about the fact that we're not very nice to immigrants. If you've noticed, right? We especially during President Trump's administration, we were particularly mean and unpleasant to them. And there's a lot of people in this country that don't want them here. And there's a fear that they're going to take jobs. But the truth is, that we have a declining birth rate in this country, and we actually need more immigrants to come to replace the workers we're losing from a declining birth rate. And most major economists, most serious economists agree, we need more workers, foreign workers to come in to fill this gap. And one economist in particular saying he thinks we need up to 370,000 more immigrants per year to fill this gap, this need. And it's true. That's when you look at our economy, immigrants fill all types of important gaps within a host of different industries. I mean, they have large presences in construction, maintenance, hospitality, like lawn care, like elder care, then the cleaning and janitorial services, like large presences, if they're 20, 30, 40+%, right? They're essential to the functioning of these industries and of these businesses within these industries. Cannot function without them. Immigrants are essential to our economy. That is a fact. But we don't treat them very well, right? I mean, we make it hard for them to get here, and then we're not necessarily very nice to them. We've been, rather abusive unnecessarily. A lot of these people, and there's always criminals, right? In any group, we've had criminals come up. But immigrants commit crimes at a lower rate than native-born Americans do. So they're not bringing crime here. There's always the outliers that come, of course. But they provide a very important, they provide the needed workers that we need and that we're going to need to do a lot of the jobs, a lot of the dirty jobs that do not pay very well, right? And they do them, and they keep these different industries running. But we're not particularly nice or grateful to these people who, and most of them are fleeing like violence or political corruption or some type of disaster. And I mean, we've just seen this with Haiti, and often we treat these people like very roughly, and it's quite shameful, and it's one of the things that's most, I don't even know what the word is for it, disappointing about our country, I guess. Yeah. So, that's a bad one. Don't like that. Also, we're not very good to our workers either. That's right. Only a third of our workers are below 100% of the poverty level. Can you believe that? Only a third. And almost half of workers half of workers in our country are considered low paid, which means they make around $10 an hour. So if you make around $10 an hour or less, you are considered low paid. And that's about half the country. Now check this out. All right. When you think about this, that during, you got half of workers, they're low paid. All right. But think about all the essential workers that we have, right? That have been so important during COVID. The ones that bore the brunt of the risk, the people that stayed working in the stores, and all the other places that stayed open. And those people aren't getting paid very well. A lot of those jobs don't even have benefits. And they're in a high risk profession. And a lot of these jobs, if they got a raise, it was paltry, and they're not getting paid like danger pay or hazard pay for what they're doing. A lot of these people are getting assaulted or abused verbally or physically just for doing their job to try and enforce, mask policy. Or whatever policy. So only so many people in the store at a time. Whatever. We've treated our essential workers, right, like garbage. We've treated people that don't have advanced skills like they don't matter and they're not important, but they are, right? We need the people that fix our cars. That's not a low wage job, but We need the people that, do these jobs, that work in the grocery stores, right? That do your lawn, that build your house, right? These people are essential. That build the buildings downtown. I mean, there's no getting away. We need them. They're here. They're doing it now. We need them now, and we need more, right? So we need to be nice to the immigrants, but also just to workers in general, right? And so only 11% of workers in the United States currently are within a union, okay? So unions are at like the low point in the United States right now. In 1983, 20% of workers were in unions, right? And at the peak in 1954, it was 35% of Americans were in unions. Now it's only 11. It was 35% in the 50s, right? The supposed fantasy time for all the right-wing, Trump-supporting Republicans that fantasize about how great the 1950s was. Well, the tax rate was sky high. In the top tax bracket, it was over 80% in the 1950s. That's part of what funded, and they had the rich had all kinds of sweet loopholes still, so they still had money, they had their secret stash, but they got taxed high, right? And that's what funded things like our whole interstate highway system, or our space race, or development of the military-industrial complex, for better or worse, right? That's the stuff that funded the development of our country after World War II. High taxation. We couldn't have done it without it. With the rich paying a big-ass chunk. They did. They did pay a chunk, right? And look at what we got for it. We got what we paid for. And it's taken this far, but it's fallen apart because we haven't re-upped on the investment yet, right? So that's it. And yeah, there's legitimate criticisms of unions, right? And we'll probably talk about that on a future episode. But there's no question about the fact that unions clearly, without question, guarantee workers, better wages and better treatment and better benefits. Now, maybe they protect some of the low performers a little too much and for a little too long. I think there is some truth to that, although I think it is overstated. But we will be looking into that in a future episode to really take a hard look at that. But there's no question about the fact that when people are able to unite together and bargain together, they can get a much better outcome than when they just try to do it all on their own. That's right. Work together. Look out for each other. So anyway, last two things I want to point out about this. In all 50 states, a minimum wage worker, this is all 50 states, a minimum wage worker cannot afford to rent a 2-bedroom house. And this is according to the National Income Housing Coalition from this year. If you make minimum wage, you cannot afford a two-bedroom apartment, not house, a 2-bedroom apartment. There is nowhere in this country you can afford it if you make minimum wage. Over 10% of Americans currently live in poverty. So that's over 33 million people. And that's right. That's according to the U.S. Census Bureau. Richest nation in the world. Most powerful country in the world. 10% of our people live in poverty. Treatment of minorities, clearly not good. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this because we've seen it whether you're talking about blacks or Hispanics, women, gays, transgender, immigrants. The treatment has not been good, and we've seen it for decades. But it has gotten better, markedly so, across the board for everyone. Still a long way to go, especially like when you're talking about there's still rampant income inequality between minorities and whites, and there's obviously we still have a long way to go, especially it's gotten a lot better for gay rights. There's still issues there, but there have been incredible improvements in the last few years. And then transgender rights is kind of the next big thing. That's very controversial because the science is, relatively new and a little confusing. It's hard for a lot of people to get their heads wrapped around, especially when you're dealing with a lot of cultural assumptions, which are not necessarily accurate about gender. but there are very powerful, right, cultural and religious concepts about gender, which are now coming in contrast to new scientific research regarding what they know about people who are transgender or non-binary, that they're born this way. Similar in some ways, different in others from gay people, to where they're born gay, you're born transgender. You don't have any control over it. It happened. It was genetic. It was genetically predisposed. It happened in the womb. And it was this combination of factors. And there's still a lot of that they're figuring out. Like what different factors combine to produce this result, right? There's like a genetic component, then there's environmental triggers. So and there's probably not even more than one, there's probably more than one answer to how these different types of things develop. And we're just at the beginning of that, but we do know that there are distinct differences with how transgender people's brains are formed in the womb. And a lot of people just can't get their heads around that. That's a lot. So it's going to take a little time to get people to really come to terms with that and understand that even though somebody looks like a man on the outside, on the inside, their gender identity is 100% woman and was from the very beginning. And there's nothing they can do about it. They were born a woman in their mind from the very start. And there's not a damn thing they can do to change it. Right? No matter how bush they look on the outside, it's all lady on the inside. And it's true. And if you read enough and talk to enough people, and I'm not just talking people, I'm talking scientists, people who work on this stuff, you're going to know what I'm talking about. There's plenty of literature out there. Go to legitimate publications, right? Universities, psychological and psychiatric associations. You want to go to credible sources for this type of thing, not somebody's blog or something. Anyway, so things get a lot better for minorities in this country, and there's a lot of special protections for them provided by our Constitution and the Bill of Rights. But, right, those protections are not always equally enforced. We've seen the unequal treatment of black people in this country, most egregiously, also bad for others, including Hispanics. But, never more so obvious with the way especially black men have been treated by police, but also how they've been handled by the justice system, that they're often not sentenced in parity with white people, that they receive a more severe sentence. We've seen that repeatedly over the years, that black people receive a stiffer sentence for the same crime a white person commits. So there's persistent things like that, wealth gap, right? That's the thing. Okay, they brought the slaves over, for hundreds of years. And slavery, obviously, what bigger stain could there be on our country's history? They brought over about 600,000 slaves during the slave trade, during that whole time, which is only about 5% of the amount of slaves that were exchanged during the slave trade. So really, a relatively small number of slaves were taken in the United States. Way to go. Great job, United States. You only took 600,000. So by 1860, there were about 4 million slaves in the United States, which is about 8% of the population at the time. And so, obviously, they had no rights, right? None. You could do anything to a slave. Anything. It doesn't matter. You could rape them. You could kill them right in front of people. You could do anything. You could brand them like a horse. You could do anything. No recourse. You could separate the families. You could, you don't have to feed them. Treat them as bad as you want. Like, a lot of the good slave masters, or the kind ones, they did it, some of them were kind and they had a kind heart, but some of them just did it because they thought it was better. It's better business to keep my slave happy. He works better when I don't whip him too much. That's the way it was for a really long time, for hundreds of years. And then when they're given their freedom, technically, they can't really exercise it, right? It becomes almost impossible to vote, especially in the South, right? And even when they go to the North or other places where they're technically free and safe, there's still a lot of suspicion against them because they're different, and it's harder to get a job. And that's still the case. I've always known people my whole life that aren't going to hire a black person. I've always encountered that. I'm a white guy, right? So there's never been any problem someone confiding in me that they're not going to hire someone because they're black. Right. I mean, that's a persistent problem that's existed. They don't trust somebody because they look like a thug or something like that in their mind. So that's a real issue, and a persistent one. We've gotten a lot better, but we could be so much. It's so much better, especially since it's completely counter to everything we claim to believe. Right? It's completely counter to our identity as a country. Right, so I did talk about slavery as well. Moving on, we're a major global polluter. We're number 2. China's number 1. They pollute about 10 million tons of CO2 into the air each year. We're about half that, of about 5 million tons of CO2. When China blew past us and took the number 1 slot, so we're number 2. India's number 3. Russia, economic powerhouse that it is, comes in at number 4 with 1.7 million tons of CO2 cranking out in the atmosphere every year. And then Japan coming in at 5 with 1.2 million tons of CO2. So those are the 5 biggest polluters of CO2 on the planet. Country-wise, U.S. is number 2. 5 million tons a year. Cranking that out in the air. Military-industrial complex. Let's talk about them. This is a special topic. So we spent $8 trillion on the war on terror. That's right. So if you're wondering where the money went for healthcare or education or fighting climate change or infrastructure, that's where it went. The F-35. Also 900,000 people killed throughout the last 20 years as part of the war on terror. That's everybody. Soldiers, terrorists, civilians, 900,000 dead as a result of our war on terror. I don't feel any safer. I actually feel less safe, believe it or not. Absolutely. And probably because of my own countrymen, I feel less safe. Not because of some terrorist in Pakistan or Afghanistan or Saudi Arabia or anywhere else. I'm more concerned about my country. My country's more at risk because of people that look just like me. Yeah. The F-35. All right. The F-35 is estimated to cost $1.7 trillion throughout the course of its life cycle. And I do have to point out that the F-35 fighter jet by Lockheed Martin has been plagued by problems from the beginning and even still. All right. And it's going to cost us $1.7 trillion. And it hasn't even been used in combat yet by any U.S. forces. The Israelis have used it. That's good. I'm glad they could use it. I'm glad someone got use out of it. But you would think that if we're going to drop $1.7 trillion on a fighter jet, that perhaps we might have used it by now. It was supposed to replace a bunch of really good planes that are still really good planes, and I think that was more of a solution. More of a solution in search of a problem. Yeah. But anyway, that's the F-35 for you. We're going to talk a quick second about the performance of our intelligence community. So if you want to talk about 9/11, if you want to talk about the CIA's prediction that the Afghan army would hold out for a year, 9/11 was a big failure on our part because we should have caught that. We should have been able, between the FBI and the CIA, to link up that these guys were here and doing it. It was our fault for missing it. It was a dumb mistake, and it's just because we didn't have these groups integrated, which they should have been. So it's our screw up because they don't want to talk to each other because people get stovepiped. They get in their own little groups. Each organization or agency has its own little culture, and they don't like to cooperate with the other ones, which is pretty natural. But that's when you get this, and then you have like thousands of Americans dead because our spies weren't coordinating and collaborating like they should have been. So it was a failure of our intelligence community. Yes. They're supposed to stop that shit. NSA, yeah, they for years, I know we talked about this before, for years denied. There was always fears that they might be listening in on us, right? We knew we were spying on everybody else in the world. But they always assured us that wasn't the case. But Edward Snowden kindly revealed to us that they had been spying on us and far exceeding their authority in doing so. So, it's hard to know who to trust when your protectors are frequently lying to you. Also, like I mentioned earlier, the early abuses during the War on Terror, where we were torturing people to try and get information. We're guilty of that. Our intelligence community was guilty of that. The intelligence community was repeatedly misused throughout its history, during Watergate, during the Nixon era, also during COINTELPRO, which is a actually more severe scandal, but much lesser known, during the Nixon administration as well. They were misused during the Iran-Contra affair, during Reagan's time as president, and all throughout the Cold War, like we talked about before, where we were often backing dictators and very unsavory people in the name of fighting communism and protecting U.S. business interests. And we would occasionally train death squads that would end up committing unspeakable atrocities that I'm not even going to mention on this show. But it's the kind of stuff like Nazis would do, like the worst things you can imagine. Doing that to, like a rebel population, to terrorize the rebels and training them to do it. We didn't do it ourselves. We didn't carry out the atrocities. We just trained them to do it. And we've done that a lot. Interestingly enough, there were two coups against Bertrand Aristide, the former president of Haiti, who was president twice there. There were two coups against him, and there were serious charges made against the CIA that they were involved in the coup attempts. No hard proof of that thus far that I've come across, but it is interesting to note that the Afghan intelligence services, that the Haitian intelligence services and the Haitian military, who were formed by the CIA in the 1980s, were both involved in both coup attempts. So maybe the CIA wasn't involved in the coup attempts against Bertrand Aristide of Haiti, but they did train the people, the groups that did overthrow it. So there is a connection there. So even sometimes we're not guilty, but we trained the people that then do the atrocity. And sometimes we know they're going to do it, and sometimes we're not sure. Sometimes they just go rogue and they do something we don't think they're going to do. But we still trained them. We still gave them resources and weapons and made it possible. Had we not done that, they wouldn't have been able to do it. We were an essential component of that terrorizing of a population. They would not have had the skills or the weapons to do so without the United States to do it. All in the name of fighting communism and protecting business interests that sound totally reasonable until you see what it is we actually do to do that. And then you realize it's as demonic as anything can be done. Yeah. It's unspeakable. So anyway, I'm going to talk about our healthcare system. Enough about the military-industrial complex. I'm getting mad. Our healthcare system, obviously, we have some of the lowest, poorest outcomes in any of the advanced countries with some of the highest costs. That is not a good deal. That is a lousy bargain. And, Big Pharma and a lot of these big medical companies are doing really well and they make a lot of money. And we want them to make money, right? We want them to do well and make money so that they develop new stuff, new technology, better drugs. We want them to get paid, but they're getting paid too well. They got carried away going too far. And it's time for the government to rein them in and use their power to negotiate prices on drugs. That's far past time. Should have done that decades ago. We need to be doing that now, across the board. We tend to treat, it's the approach as well. It's our general approach is too profit driven, right? It's fast food oriented. Rush. Get in. It's almost, we're always treating the symptom. We're not even treating the root cause. We're not even looking for the root cause. We're just treating the symptom a lot of the time. And also it's like, it's if you can get the health care, right? There's rationing, right? We talk about rationing, and it's something that conservatives, especially, and Republicans will talk about the healthcare rationing that occurs in like a single payer system in some countries, which can happen, where you have to wait. There's not a doctor available, and you got to wait 3 to 6 months or whatever to get this operation done. That does happen, right? That happens here too, sometimes a lesser degree, but also not just because of availability, because there are some places where you go in this country, especially in rural places, where the rationing is there's nobody here, right? There's only one doctor in 100 miles. And so it's an availability thing. But also rationing by price, because our medicines, because our healthcare is so expensive, sometimes you just can't afford to get the treatment. So it's available. You could get it if you could pay for it. Or if you can pay for it, you may have to go into the hole big time to do it. And then you're in debt for the rest of your life just to get the treatment that you need. Truthfully, unless you are extremely wealthy, you are one catastrophic illness or event away from being financially destitute because of your healthcare costs. There are so many illnesses that can end up costing you millions of dollars in treatment to fight it, and the drugs and treatment that you would need. And that is not a humane system. Right? We need to better pool the resources to help take care of each other better. We haven't done that. But we've made sure that healthcare companies get paid, insurance companies get paid, Big Pharma gets paid. That's fine. But their mandate, all of them, is to provide for people's health. If they do not meet that core function, then they no longer, their exorbitant prices are no longer justified, and they never were. So we're not seeing the performance for the amount we're paying. We're not seeing the quality for all the sacrificing and amount we're paying. We're not seeing it. So it's time for us to get a better deal from our healthcare system. We'll say this though: one thing has improved. The Affordable Care Act. So there's 33 million currently uninsured in our country. All right, most other advanced countries, everybody's insured, but about 10% of our country is uninsured currently. About 33 million. But 11 years ago, in 2010, when the ACA was first passed, that that percentage of uninsured wasn't 10%; it was 16%. So in that time, we put 6% of the population. We've got them covered. We've got them healthcare coverage, and that translates out to about roughly 31 million people, approximately, have gained healthcare coverage since the ACA was passed in 2010. So that's encouraging. That is an encouraging development. So thank you, Obama. Thanks, Obama. I do want to talk, this is very serious, our paltry safety net. Okay? And a lot of this information here comes from the City University of New York. But the U.S. spends about 18% of its GDP on social safety net programs like welfare, job training, food stamps, things like that. 18% of our GDP is spent on social safety net programs. Compare that to France, they spend 31%. So 13% more social safety net spending by France. The U.S. is below average. We're below the average on unemployment, providing unemployment insurance, disability insurance, and worker pay compared to other advanced, economically developed countries. The U.S. spends the least on labor market programs like job training, job placement, job creation programs. We spend the least out of all the other advanced countries. Dead last. We are the only country that does not provide automatic health insurance to its citizens. We are also the only country that does not provide paid maternity leave to its mothers. We're the only one. And the child care situation, I probably don't have to tell you, is a horrendous nightmare in this country. It's hard to get. It's the quality varies wildly, and it's extremely expensive. And it's one of the key reasons why they are having such a hard time filling a lot of these vacant jobs right now. It's not because of the stimulus, and they've nailed this down already, and they've isolated it. It's not because of the stimulus money that people were getting. One of the main reasons is people can't get health. They can't get child care, somebody to watch your kid, right? And that child care that they can get is too expensive. That their wages are so low and child care is so high that it's actually, that it makes sense to just stay home, because they're going to spend all of their wages. If they're like a minimum wage worker, they're going to spend all their wages on child care. So there's no point in even going. You might as well not work, because you're just going to spend all that money on child care. So we need, and other advanced countries have much better much more robust, generous, uniformly developed with like national standards, right? And standards of training, right? To raise the bar for child care. That's what we need in this country. And these things drive economic development, right? They actually boost productivity. But we're not doing them because we're short-sighted and we're greedy and we don't want to spend money. Nobody likes to shell out money up front, right? But these are important investments that if you don't make, you're never going to benefit from them. All right. So anyway, now we're going to talk about corporate and wealthy power in the power of the corporate and the wealthy in the United States, which is pretty well established. Obviously, we see massive tax cuts for corporations and for wealthy people ever since the 1980s, and it's just picked up speed, and the cuts have got even more aggressive. The anti-tax rhetoric reaching a lunatic pitch in recent years, defying any reason. You have to have enough tax revenue to pay for things, guys. But if you're wondering why, our national debt is almost $29 trillion as we speak. $29 trillion we owe. A lot of that to China and Japan. If you're looking for a reason why, look no further than the fact that we don't tax the rich. We don't tax the wealthy. They get a sweet deal, right? And that we fight wars on the credit card. A big chunk of our war on terror was put on the card. Same as the Medicare Part D expansion. There was no funding for that. That was unfunded. We put that on the card. We've just spent money. And then we give crazy tax cuts to the wealthy, who could have been a source of revenue to pay off that debt. But instead we just give them a pass so they can go buy another jet or have a company do a stock buyback. Buy its own stock to boost its stock's value. There's the biggest bullshit practice, that I have ever seen or heard of in my life. We should make that illegal. It should be illegal. It is a corrupt, unethical, conflict of interest practice that should not fucking exist. I'm sorry, but that is ridiculous. And the fact that we allow that boggles my mind. But this is America, and it's like, there's nothing being wrong with pro-business up to a point. But when it becomes corrupt, and you're turning your blind eye from a lot of realities, then it's like, you need to take care of the worker. You need to take care of the customer. There are other things besides just the bottom line, right? Because if you do not provide enough value to the client or to the customer, they're not going to come back, right? You have to provide enough value, or people are not going to come back. But you also have to pay your fair share of taxes if you expect this country to run right, and you got to chip in your fair share. And the wealthy owe more. They owe more because they have more, and it's not just because they have more. It's not just the ability to pay. It is they derive, and we've spoken about this before, they derive a greater economic benefit from their wealth, right? So, the road they drive on, right? The electrical grid that they use, right? The clean air that they breathe, the clean water that they drink, right? That the government protects for all of us, has a greater economic benefit for them because they make 500 times more the amount than you do, right? So that road derives greater economic benefit for him than it does for you or me, right? That airspace he flies through derives greater economic benefit for him than it does for you or me. The safety that he or she enjoys as a billionaire or multimillionaire, they derive a greater economic benefit from that than from you or me. Not to mention all the awesome tax subsidies, right? And tax loopholes and incentives that they get. Elon Musk, for example, received almost $5 billion in subsidies for his company from the federal government, from the government. So next time you think billionaires, when they act like they made it all by themselves, remember, they've all been subsidized. They've all received government subsidies. Same for Amazon. Same for all of them, right? They've all received government subsidies. They've all received government help. But they act like they haven't. And they act like they've done it all on their own. And that we're ungrateful, that we would ask them simply to pay their fair share of taxes to help our country. They would rather play astronaut than do what they should do. Now, Jeff Bezos, give him credit. He just said he's going to spend $1 billion to protect the world's oceans and waterways, and that's awesome. That's really great. And the problem is, all we got to do is increase his taxes, have him pay the taxes he should be paying. That'll generate way more than $1 billion to protect our oceans. A lot more to fight climate change. Yeah, I mean that's a nice gesture, the $1 billion, but we can get a lot more simply by taxing you properly, which is what we should and we will be doing relatively soon. If the Democrats can get their act together. So yeah, corporate wealthy power. We got low taxes in this country comparatively to other advanced countries. Like I said, the average European or advanced country collects about 34% of tax revenue from its GDP. Ours is only about 24. Our tax revenue only comes to about 24% of GDP. So we pay a much lower amount in taxes, and we get less for it. That's right. We have crumbling infrastructure. We got a lot of problems with our healthcare system, right? We got problems with our educational system. We got problems with our infrastructure. All kinds of problems with climate change we're not dealing with. I mentioned stock buybacks, non-compete agreements. I know Biden has did an executive order banning the use of them and limiting the use of them, particularly with the federal government and with contractors. But that has been a major, non-compete agreements are like a major stifling of competition because it locks people in to a certain job. It makes it harder for them to change jobs and within an industry. And then also like these sort of bogus certification requirements. There's a lot of certifications that are kind of arbitrary and have been kind of put up by certain business interests and business groups within certain business communities and industries that are helpful to the business groups, but not necessarily the workers. It makes it harder for people to find work with these sort of arbitrary certifications that really don't mean very much about what you actually know in that field. So that's something we're going to have to fix because that also limits competition and innovation. So there's some stuff, like I said, the national debt's $29 trillion. And it didn't have to be that way. All we had to do was make people pay the taxes that they're supposed to tax. But we didn't do that. We've been giving them giveaways since the 80s. Yeah, like 40 years of tax giveaways. That's why we're in the spot we're in now. That's why we can't pay for anything. That's why everything's a mess. Because we gave them a pass since the 80s. We've been worshiping the rich like they're gods or something. Gods among us. Right? Give them whatever they want. So they will show us the light. The problem is we led the way. We we funded them. We gave them government funding in the form of grants and tax breaks and subsidies so that their company could function, right? Not only do they derive greater economic benefit from all the different services the government provides to them constantly, like the rest of us, not only do they derive greater economic benefit from all of that, but they get all of this. They get all these other benefits on top of that. On top of just the greater economic benefit, they don't have to pay taxes. They don't have to, they're treated like a god. They have exorbitant power, right? Excessive power. When you're talking about who they can lobby, right, in government, whether state government or national government, that we've given them too much credit. A lot of the innovation is based on government research that they then take and capitalize upon, right? Or they take government funding that they wouldn't invest themselves because it's too risky, right? That's the thing. A lot of innovation is funded by government funding because private corporations are unwilling to take that risk. They're unwilling to take certain research and development risks because they don't know if they'll pay out. But if they get a government grant, right? If the government does some research and then passes off, then they benefit from that. So there's a lot that the government does, and we're paying for that. That's us. That's us paying Jeff Bezos. That's us paying Elon Musk. We're fronting them to, build their business, and so we're giving them the initial investment, but then they completely deny that we provided them with the startup money, right? We're the investor. And now they're acting like we never invested in them, like they did it all themselves. How preposterous is that? Can you imagine if you made it, right? But you only made it, you're like this business person, but you had these investors, right? They gave you the money from the start. They believed in you, and you made it after you struggled for years, right? But then you forget about all the investors that gave you all that money. That's what they've done. They're trying to pretend like we didn't give them all that money up front, that we didn't give Bezos the money he needed, or the Amazon the money he needed, or that Elon Musk didn't get that $5 billion. They're acting like, what? You didn't? No, we gave you billions, dude. We funded you. And now you're acting like you're doing us a favor? No. Those days are over, right? The pro-business brainwashing has come to an end. So, billionaires, nothing wrong with them, but they got to pay their fair share. Just like everybody else, folks. It's how it's going to be. All right. Mentioned this a little bit. We're getting close to the end. I know you're saying, thank God. Here we go. Infrastructure. It's crumbling. When you're talking about bridges and roads, you see it on the news all the time. You never know where you're going to go, and something's going to just give out from underneath you or on top of you. And it's gone on too far. And we got the infrastructure bill blocked in Congress right now. You can thank Sinema and Manchin and a few others for holding that up. But we need to get that passed, right? We got our train system, our public transportation system, our airports. They're sorely maintained. They're technologically inferior to many advanced countries. If you talk to a lot of people who travel a lot, they'll tell you, you come to the United States, our airports are a joke compared to a lot of other countries, especially advanced countries, how inefficient they are and how old and decrepit they are by comparison. And the same goes for our public transportation on our train systems. Far inferior to most advanced countries because we haven't invested in them. I lived in D.C. for 11 years, and at one point, when I first moved there, the metro system there was pretty good. By the end, I was about to lose my mind. It could barely function. It was horrible. It was like torture riding that thing. Unbelievable. We're going to need vast amounts of money to spend on climate change mitigation strategies, right? To deal with wildfires, hurricanes, storms, tornadoes, flooding, drought, rising sea levels. We're going to need to make all these types of building changes, right? Different things we could do, all kinds of different things. Obviously, a lot of reforestation, planting a lot of trees, obviously. But the way we build along the coast has to change. That's going to cost money. The way we build buildings to be resistant to storms and we be resistant to hurricanes or storm surges. It's got to change. That's going to cost money, right? Though those are good jobs programs, there's a lot of people we could put to work doing that. Right? Much better to have them spend money on that than blowing someone up for no good reason, right? We didn't even need to be in Iraq. We did not need to stay in Afghanistan for 20 years. We need to get bin Laden. We didn't need to stay there for 20 years. No. We spent $2 billion in Afghanistan. We spent about $2 billion in Iraq. We could already be fighting climate change. We could have better schools already and better health care. But we decided to spend it fighting the stupid war on terror, which has created more enemies and made us less safe now than we were before. We are not a smart country. We should be. We have a lot of smart people in it, but we don't often use our power smartly because we're too confident, we're too cocky, and we're having too much fun enjoying the good life. We've had it good. We've had it good since the end of World War II. We were at the top of the heap when the rest of the world was in rubble. And we ran the game for decades to our advantage. But what happened was when other countries started to rise, started to prosper again, after they were able to rebuild, is theirs started to come up. And so that evens out with us a little bit. They become a little more competitive. It's a little harder for us. Then all of a sudden there's some changes, right, in our country. We become more open-minded. We become more just about how we treat black people, Hispanics, women, gay, right? All of a sudden, there's all these workers that white guys are competing against. We used to not be able to compete against, right? Now we're competing against everybody. It's not so easy anymore. It's a lot easier when you're just competing against a lot of other dudes that look like you, right? And you don't have to compete against women or minorities. I mean, that's a pretty sweet setup. Well, that's over, right? So that's some of the challenges that we face. That things have gotten more challenging as our culture, as our society has changed and gone through these changes. And we're gonna have to spend a lot of money to fight climate change. And we're gonna have to spend a lot of money to rebuild our infrastructure. And we gotta get that infrastructure built through. But it's embarrassing, it's serious, right? It is kind of a joke. It's like the United States of America should not have crumbling infrastructure. But we've been cheap. And we've let the rich get away with not paying the taxes that would have funded that. It was like, we believed, a lot of us believed, I didn't, but a lot of people did, that the trickle-down economics. Just give the rich what they want and then it'll flow down magically somehow. That never happened. There's no evidence to support it. It never occurred. It doesn't work, right? Public development projects must be funded by public funds, which must be garnered through taxation. Right? Now, there's different schemes for how you do that, right? It doesn't have to be an income tax. It doesn't have to be a VAT tax, right? But government money often is what is needed to fund important investment, because you're not going to rely on a private company to do it, because they're not going to take a risk if there's not an obvious profit to be made. So anyway, the educational system, we're almost done. Our educational system in this country, extremely poor outcomes, especially regarding science and history. For example, only 7% of American adults can name the first 4 U.S. presidents in order. All right, so that's Washington, Adams, Jefferson, and Madison, the first 4. Okay, only 7%. Now, this is according to the U.S. Mint in 2007. So maybe we've all gotten a lot smarter since then, but I don't think so. Only 7% could name the first 4 U.S. presidents. Here's another one for you. Only 30%, also according to the U.S. Mint, only 30% knew Thomas Jefferson was the 3rd president of the United States. Only 30%. Less than a third knew Jefferson was the 3rd president. Okay. The guy who wrote the Declaration of Independence. Only about 50% of U.S. adults could name all 3 branches of government. And this is according to the Intercollegiate Studies Institute, and that was in 2008. Now, according to the National Assessment of Educational Progress in 2014, only 18% of 8th graders had a proficient knowledge of history. 18%. 18. Okay, and you can look at our nightly news show, or you can look at any footage, a lot of the footage from January 6th or any Trump rally, and you can see that there is a dearth of science and history knowledge in this country. Sadly, when you have people that don't know the basic historical information about our country, or the rampant science denial that's been going on for years now, would not be possible in a country that had taken its science education seriously and it had taught critical thinking seriously. Not so many people could be so easily duped and misled had we taught critical thinking skills in school, but we didn't. We teach obedience, how to follow rules, how to check certain boxes, how to do what you're told, how to fit in. Those are the teach, and we do teach you basic facts, and we do teach you some skills. It's not that we don't, but the focus is more on the test. We teach to the test, right? We want to make sure you pass the test, so you graduate, so you get into school, so you get the job. It's job focus, money, money, job focus, and that's the problem. There's too much profit motive in most things in our country. We've let profit have too much say. There's nothing wrong with profit, but you've got to know when to control it, right? You can't let profit cook the books when it comes to analysis. You can't let profit cook the books when it comes to education. You can't let profit cook the books when it comes to taking care of people's health. You do not want a private police force. You do not want a private, fire department that's going to, take care of the rich first, and maybe they'll get to you, if they can. But if you didn't give them very much money, you're gonna be last on the list. We don't want that. We want a public, we want a government that treats us fairly and equitably. And what we're seeing with our educational system is that we don't have the critical thinking skills to make the proper decisions about how we govern ourselves, because we haven't had good history or civics education. And we haven't had good science education, apparently, because people are denying COVID's dangers, right? They're denying the effectiveness of vaccines. We have this ridiculous anti-vaxxer movement in this country. It's not just in this country, but it's bad here. It's really bad. And it's one of the prime reasons why the epidemic hasn't ended and why it's still so bad, is because people won't get the vaccine. It's just preposterous when you think about all the different things. We got people that are flat earthers that actually believe the earth is flat. You still actually have people that believe that. They don't believe in climate change. They don't believe in evolution. There could be no greater indictment of our educational system, right? We need an informed populace simply to be able to make smart, intelligent choices so we can govern ourselves wisely. So, yeah, obviously our educational system, not that great. And the outcomes, again, compared to a lot of advanced countries, are at the lower end. Thusly, because of our poor educational system, largely because of our poor knowledge of history, that we have this really terrible civil discourse in our country now, where it's become just okay to shout at each other and say rude things to each other and not make any sense at all, and not even have any logical, reasonable arguments. People just yelling at each other, saying nonsense. It's extremely poor. It's one of the reasons we want to do the show, was try and work on that and try and bridge the gap a little bit. Talk about how we can engage with each other and talk in a straightforward but honest, uncompromising but compassionate way, and that we can all behave more like adults and less like deranged idiots, which is what we look like to the rest of the world, and what we look like to me if I ever turn on the TV news, which I don't, because it's ridiculous, it's offensive. I just read the news. I read the Washington Post. I don't watch any damn television news at all. I occasionally I'll read an article from CNN, but I won't watch CNN. So we're getting here right to the last end. Republican dishonesty and depravity, right? They have basically, whether it's January 6th denialism, trying to pretend Antifa was the one who executed it, trying to claim that the attackers on January 6th were somehow innocent and noble, denying the election was won by Joe Biden, without any evidence at all to support voter fraud, essentially supporting stealing votes from Democrats, either through overturning the vote, as was tried in numerous states, and by Trump, and by many people in Congress. And many Republicans are still trying to overturn it, even now. So trying to steal our votes, either through overturning the vote or making ballot access virtually impossible, making it almost impossible for you to vote. That is their scheme to hold on to power, because they no longer have any really good ideas, unless it's about enriching the powerful. Schemes to funnel money to the wealthy and powerful. They're good at that. They're good at coming up with schemes to scare people, to say things that scare people that will make them vote for them to vote against the Democrats, right? Saying that we're all socialists, or we love terrorists, or we hate America. These are the types of things that work. They actually work with people who are not paying attention and not exactly on top of it. Which, there's a portion of every country that has what we call, the technical term is dumbasses. People who just don't know that much about things, especially when it comes to politics. Very few people follow politics this closely. I follow politics closely, and I can tell you very few of you have a sophisticated understanding of politics. And I'm not the master, but, compared to most people, I'm light years ahead of you. Because I spend a lot of time at it. I really, really work at it, right? I don't know hardly much about organized sports in general because it doesn't interest me. I don't care. I enjoyed playing it when I was in school, but I don't care to follow it. To me, it just seems like a big time killer. There's a bunch of other stuff I could be doing, right? So if you come talk to me about, like what this team is doing or how the league's doing or something, clueless. I have no idea, right? There's all kinds of stuff. We can't know everything, but we should know how to govern our affairs, and we should know how things work, how the systems work, and what's true and what isn't. What scientific principles are actually true and what aren't. We should know that. And if we can read and we can have a basic level of reasoning, we can solve those problems ourselves. And we can communicate with others and share ideas, right? And develop those solutions into more sophisticated solutions to solve our problems. And so that's what this is all about. But very disappointed with what we've seen with the Republican Party. They've basically become a borderline terrorist organization at this point. We've got a large swath of the party that is supporting these all sorts of anti-democratic activities and trying different ways to overthrow the vote, find ways to be able to overturn a democratic vote in states, or to just make it harder for people to be able to vote at all. And actually finding ways, right, to intimidate people, like how they're going to harass women in Texas, right, who trying to get an abortion or trying to get an abortion, or how they're trying to institute these laws that make it okay for you to run over a protester, as long as you're not trying to run over one, right? What do you think the chances are of the officer kind of turning a blind eye to some of those little hit and runs in some of those southern states that have implemented those, well, not just southern either, those laws that make it, you're not going to be held legally accountable if you run over a protester, just as long as it wasn't obvious you were targeting them. So just don't be obvious, right, about how you target them. So it completely takes the burden of safety away from the driver as an inducement for them to actually run over the protesters, kind of the wink-wink thing. Same type of thing with what's going on in Texas, where they're essentially deputizing people to harass women. Now, you may not agree with abortion, which I understand completely if you don't like that. But there's a right way and a wrong way to go about doing it, and that is the wrong way. Anyway, let's criticize the Democrats before we wrap this up. So I love the Democrats, Democratic Party. Got a lot of flaws to it. A lot of different groups, a lot of disparate groups with a lot of different interests and passionate ideas. that they are hesitant to compromise on. So trying to, organize a Democratic Party is kind of like trying to herd a bunch of cats. And we struggled, the Democrats consistently for decades have struggled with trying to unite with a powerful, clear, concise, and convincing message that will allow them to secure power necessary to make the changes that we need to make. Right now, I'm a progressive, but I do understand conservatives' positions on a lot of things. I don't necessarily agree with them, but a conservative is someone who believes in rule of law and democracy and respects democracy and the right of an individual's vote and the sacredness of that vote. A conservative respects all of that. If you don't, you're not a conservative. You've gone from conservative to fascist. And you become an authoritarian. You become a fascist. You don't respect my right to vote. If you think you can take that away, you're not a conservative. Just so you know. I don't have a problem with conservatives. I don't agree with them, but I respect them if they're true to their principles. One of the main reasons I don't think conservatism works in general in the modern world, I think it's more consistent with the life of the 17 or 1800s, when it was slower. It was a slower life that matched a slower, more conservative approach to life. But things happen a lot faster now in life, and we need to be able to adapt more quickly to it. The slow, deliberative nature of the U.S. government, with its shared and divided powers, has encouraged, and also like the Senate and the filibuster and things like that, have encouraged a slower, more deliberative process, which in many ways has been very good for our country. That we haven't made a lot of rash, careless, reckless decisions that might have happened in a parliamentary system, where a party in power can quickly just take over and make all kinds of changes to everything really fast. Can't do that here. Much harder. You gotta gain allies across all these different interest groups over time and bring them together. It takes a lot longer to get things done and to make change. And that has been good for the most part up until now. But now we're in a situation where we need to do a lot of changes really quickly. Most obviously regarding climate change. We're going to need to spend a lot of money very quickly and intelligently to mitigate the effects of climate change and to fight climate change, to keep the Earth from warming to the 1.5 degrees Celsius threshold, 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial level of the global temperature. And we're running out of time. Anywhere from 5 to 15 years, we may hit that and then surpass it. And things will just exponentially get worse, climate and weather-wise. And the disasters will get worse. And the amount that we have to spend will increase. And the amount of suffering that will be involved will increase. And the longer we wait, the worse it's going to get. And this is what, we've been putting it off. We've been putting it off for decades. We've known about this for 50 years, that climate change was happening. And it's become more and more obvious in the last 10 to 20 years, but we still haven't taken sufficient action to address it. So it's time to get on the stick with that and these other issues that I've talked about. I mean, we are a great country, one of the greatest. I do agree with that. I do believe that. And I'm proud to be an American. I'm not ashamed of it at all. I'm not one of those people that hates America. And I don't really know anybody that does. I know people that are critical of them. I actually do know a few people who hate America, but not very many. and you know what? I don't agree with them. And I think, sometimes, sometimes people, there are some people that they're right to be angry at us, right? But they don't see, we are not any worse than anyone else. We're just more powerful. All the other nations, all the other groups, all the other cultures on earth have done horrible things to each other, unspeakable things to each other at different times. There's no real indication that Americans are any worse than anybody else. In general, over time, at all. It's just we're more powerful. And because we're more powerful, we have power to do more good, but we also have power to do more bad. Right? Whatever we do has more of an impact simply because of our power and size. And so we have to use that power responsibly and intelligently. We've been unwise with a lot of our power. Look no further than the war on terror to see how stupidly we threw that power around. But not just the war on terror and other things that we've behaved unwisely, but we got away with it because we're so big and powerful. We got away with it for a long time. But climate change is going to change that for us. And the other problems in our country and our democracy being under threat, that's going to change a lot of things for us. We're going to force us to turn things around. And I believe in us. I think we are one of those countries, like in World War II, where we were faced with an existential crisis against fascism, fighting Japan, a war on two fronts, against Japan and Germany, and Italy as well, and their allies. And it was a total war. We haven't had a total war since then. Arguably, I don't think we've had one before. I think that is, truthfully, our only total war. I know some war historians are going to dispute that, but clearly World War II was a total war, where all of our resources were completely dedicated toward that, and a huge amount of government taxation going on, right? Everything in the country was dedicated towards fighting that war. That's going to be like this. That's what's going to happen if we're going to beat climate change. Because like I said, it's going to take from a previous episode, it's going to take globally $9 trillion a year just to start fighting climate change. $9 trillion a year across all the countries. And we're going to have to kick in one of the biggest chunks because we're one of the world's biggest polluters. We're going to have to start spending that money and spending it wisely, using it on the technologies and the solutions that provide the most bang for our buck. And we got to be smart. We can't be wasting our money like we've been wasting it on defense or on the intelligence community or on excessive prices for drugs or other, medical devices. We got to get a lot smarter with how we spend and how we use our resources, or it's going to be too late, right? But I do believe that we will pull it together, but we can't wait any longer. There is that point when you've waited too long, when it's too late, and there is nothing you can do. And at some point, we will cross that Rubicon. And then there was nothing we can do but wait for our destruction. That is what we face. And that is what's real. And I'm just as guilty as the rest of you. We are all guilty. It's your fault just as mine. There's a lot of things I could have done sooner. Things I could have come around on a lot sooner. It took me a lot longer than they should have. And I wonder, why did it take me so damn long? But I was busy. I was busy working, living, raising a family like everybody else. And it takes a while to put all the pieces together. Well, I don't have them all together, but I got a lot of them. Enough now to know what I need to do and what we need to do. Playtime's over. We've had fun. Things have been good for us. But we're going to have to step it up in a way we've never even imagined if we want to survive. I believe in us. I believe in the United States. And I believe that we can be better than we were ever before. And I want to be a part of that. And I hope you do too. That's it for this episode of The Breakdown. I hope you enjoyed it. I hope it means something to you. It does to me. I am proud of this country, and I have sworn my life to defend it, however necessary. So, I hope you'll do the same. On our next episode, we're going to talk about the meaning of life. That's right, the meaning of life. We've been looking at it for a little while now, kicking it around, and we finally figured it out. Now we're actually going to talk about the meaning of life, but we're not going to talk about it from a philosophical or religious perspective, but more from a scientific perspective. And what I mean by that is this. We are going to look at what we know about nature and about life and the properties and principles of life. What do we know from science? We're going to focus on that. We're going to focus on that, and then we're going to see what can we derive. What knowledge can we derive from that? What assumptions might we develop from that? What ideas and concepts might we develop from the things that we know about life scientifically? What can we extrapolate from that further than has been taken? We've got some stuff to talk about, and we're looking forward to it. It's going to be a hot episode that's guaranteed to change your life. So you got to check it out. Thanks again for watching. I really enjoyed it. Always appreciate the viewers and listeners. It's an honor. Take care of yourselves and each other, and I'll talk to you soon.